Hello, everybody. So if you've seen any of my videos, you recognize me to some degree. Of course, I know some of the facial hair is a little different than what it used to be, but yeah, it's me. This version of me anyway. And of course, I have somebody with me today, and this is Lucy. And Lucy is a fellow explorer that's been at it for quite some time, actually, and has some really cool experiences in their history. And so I've asked Lucy to join me in this collaboration, and she has very nicely agreed to play a part in what we're doing here now. So I think what I'll do just briefly is hand it over to Lucy, and she can share with you whatever she feels in the moment would be nice to share with you about herself. So why don't you go ahead, Lucy?
Well, hello. I always wonder how to introduce oneself because there's always the career or there's the heart. I would say for today, let's go with the heart. My energetic signature is joy, and my experience of life is one of blissful connection with nature and people.
Which is certainly energies that I've recognized in you as we've gotten to know each other a little bit now, as we've interacted through a variety of groups, actually. Yeah. So what we're going to be doing today is I'll put it like that at first. I'm going to be sharing information through a channeled source that become familiar with, and it has developed a little bit, changed, went through a metamorphosis, shall we say, in the past perhaps half a year, where it's more about the connection, of course, with my higher self and a group of aspects of consciousness. And there's a name that I've utilized for that group, and that name is Dsetu. And you can spell it with a capital D, Setu. And the way that it works for me is that as I share information, sometimes it feels like it's just to hire me, and at other times it feels like there are additions from other aspects of consciousness of this group that's there. And as we go through these, I'll probably identify some of those, maybe not today, some of those aspects of consciousness and how some of them have been represented on our planet, historically speaking, for us, but there are some that have not. And so this will be what the channel is about then as we move forward. Will be me sharing this information in collaboration with Lucy. And Lucy's here kind of, the word that we might be familiar with as the moderator in this process, but I know, of course, her energy will be a little different than what we would typically think of as a moderator. Somebody who plays the role of maybe how the audience may respond. Some of you may respond. Any additional questions, the way to tie things together with what's being said, things of that nature is kind of what I envisioned Lucy helping us with as she was here. And so unless there's something that you would like to add before we get started, Lucy, I think that what I'll do is I would say invite, but since they're already circling the wagons, shall I say, then just kind of relax and allow this process to occur. And again, just so everybody has some idea, I do typically get information as these things are approaching, and the subject matter today is going to be choice. I'm not quite sure how that's going to be spoken about, but that is what we've got going on. We'll be back in a second. So we would like to offer our greetings to all of you today and express our appreciation at being able to interact with all of you in this moment with that fantastic energy that you all bring to our interactions. And so, as was mentioned, what we'll explore today is the idea of choice. Now, of course, as you go through your life, you're making choices in every moment. And it's become so very familiar to you that many of those choices you make without paying attention to the fact that you're making a choice. And if you've explored these types of subject matters in the past at all, In other words, if you've explored self, if you're exploring spiritual, metaphysical types of things, you have some familiarity of the importance of choice and all the aspects of your consciousness that surround and interpenetrate choice and make it the powerful expression of your daily physical journey that it actually is, because it's tied into many, many, I guess in the moment we'll call them mechanisms of consciousness, ways of utilizing and manipulating consciousness to have the experience that you're having here. So choice is a very potent aspect of what it is that you do throughout the day. And again, we know that many times, many of your choices are made in a very automatic way. And in large degree, this can be fine because many of the things that you're doing are not things that are going to substantially change your life. You may make a choice about what time you're going to get up. You may make a choice about what kind of clothes you're going to wear. You may make a choice about what you're going to eat for lunch or maybe dinner. You may make a choice about who you may call, what their conversation is going to be like. Each of those choices does something that you may or may not be familiar with. And we're just going to present it like this, even though it happens a little differently than this, but this will make it easy for you to interact with. Each time you make a choice, what you're doing is you're experiencing your experience of reality as a new version of yourself. Each time you make a choice, it's a new you. It's having a brand new experience. And what it's also done is it's opened up, shall we say, in that regard, a certain pathway. Think of yourself as coming to, let's say, maybe a T in a road, and you have the choice of going left or right. If you make that first step left, then the rest of your steps are going to be in that direction. If you make that step right, the rest of your steps are going to be in that direction. And so each of your choice does this for you. It turns you in a direction. And that direction is many times about the inner things that are going on within you as well. Because as you make a choice, you choose, in effect anyway, to utilize certain beliefs and definitions that are within you. You pull in ways that you're going to choose in that moment to see your existence, how you're going to perceive it. And that's what each of your choices do, even your smallest choices, but particularly those bigger ones, they do that. Now, as you've had your experience here, as you chose to have your experience here, there are those level of choices also. There are the choices that you made, shall we say, prior, using the concept of time, prior to actually showing up in your physical existence. There were choices you made as, we could say spirit, we could say oversoul, some level of your oversoul, however you would like to phrase that. There were choices that you made there. Did you want to become involved in this reality? And if you did, what part of that play or that movie of physical reality and all the various ways that physical reality could have come about, which one of those did you choose to participate in? And so there are those choices also. There are choices in that regard that we'll call them perhaps historically you're also associated with. Because of course, as those greater aspects of who and what you are, as the oversoul you have many, 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 many connections to many different expressions that you're making. And those also are part of your choices, because as you make a choice here, you're connecting with many of those other choices. And so in the background, those aspects of you are aware of all that stuff that's happening. As you make your choices here, then you tie into those things automatically. Now, sometimes the choices that you make here may seem like they're just this kind of surprise or whatever kind of choice that shows up in the moment. And you may not think that the environment that you've created for yourself in that moment was an environment that you created purposefully in that moment so that that choice was going to be in front of you. Because you're creating your experience of your reality moment by moment by moment. And those moments are incredibly rapid. And so you can have a flow of your reality and a situation where there are choices in front of you, not even realizing that you created that reality in that moment so those choices could be in front of you, which would then potentially lend an energy to you to make a particular choice because it was going to move you in a direction that was going to be something that was going to fulfill you in a way that you would like to be fulfilled. So those choices are there in that regard also. Now, some of the other choices that you've made, historically speaking, in that larger context of who and what you are, have some bearing on your life. Some of the challenges that you have as you experience this particular exploration, this dimension, this physical dimension, are associated with other connections you have with other aspects of yourself. Because you have chosen, in the context of what we might call historically, you have chosen to participate in other civilizations that have had challenges of various types. Some have been very challenging. And so one of the other choices that you've made is to express yourself in various environments, and we could call those environments planets if you want to, within what we might call our solar system. You've chosen to express yourself in those ways to explore certain themes that, again, you chose to be part of your exploration as you chose to be part of physical reality. And so there are those connections that you've also interacted with, and they are a choice also because as you explore this reality, you are interacting with those versions of yourself in those other places. You might say your incarnational yous, but in another place. We call it that perhaps. And so in that's a choice also because it colors the way that your experience plays out for you. It brings themes to you that you then can explore, that then provides for you different choices. If you're exploring these types of things, you probably have at least some idea of the idea out there that you're the one that's creating your experience of the reality that you're having, right? That you as the soul are creating through the filters of your beliefs, your definitions, your expectations, things of that nature. And those things will say, filter your consciousness, configure your consciousness to then show up as your reality around you in line with the theme of what this physical dimension is going to be about that has been, we'll call it discussed by all the deeper aspects of consciousness that are part of this particular dimension of reality that you have here. And so, because you are the one that's creating your experience of your reality, then the choices that you make and how you react or respond to what's going on in that reflective reality that you're experiencing then are some of the most important things that you can pay attention to. So basically, if you have a response or a reaction to something that's going on around you that is a little bit more of a challenging response, whether you feel, and we'll just use typical words here, whether you feel frustration or anger or fear or confusion, sadness, whatever it might happen to be, those types of things. If you're feeling that, you can also at that moment many times pull into the equation that somebody else or something else is involved in creating your experience of your reality, and that it's not you that's created that experience of your reality. Typically, if you're angry, you're usually angry at somebody else or at a situation. And it's because that individual or that situation has just done something to you, has just put you in a situation, an environment that was not of your choosing. But if we're thinking back to the concept that you're the one that's creating your experience of reality, how can that be? It can't be. And so then what you're going to want to do, and of course we're not the only one who's expressed this, is then to think back, okay, if this is what's going on, why did I create this particular thing in my reality at this moment? It may be something that you need to understand about yourself. It may just be practice. It may just be, okay, let's see what you do with this if this shows up in your life. That can be a tripping point sometimes for individuals who have found their way into this exploration and are a little ways into their exploration. They can feel sometimes when those types of things happen that, well, what am I doing wrong? I'm doing these things that I've learned how to do through these various individuals who've taught me this information. Why am I having this experience? You're having the experience just to see what you'll do with the experience. You're just practicing with yourself. Many, many times you haven't done anything wrong in that regard. It is just practice. It's you wanting to know how you will respond to a situation because, again, it's the inner things that are happening within you that you're going to then experience in your quote-unquote outer environment as your experience. And so it is important as you move through this journey to become increasingly familiar with what's happening within you. What choices are you making within? Because those are the things that you're going to experience outside of yourself. And so at this moment, before we continue, what we would like to do is to ask our collaborator, Lucy, if there's in fact something that she would like to add, if there's something that she would maybe like us to clarify or to build on a little bit before we continue with this theme.
Yes, thank you. For people who are still getting accustomed to the idea of creating their own reality and settling into that, how would you respond to someone who says, I like at one level the concept of I create my own reality, but I'm not sure I like the sort of pre-birth decisions I may have made that created a reality that was very difficult for me, say, in my early years, choosing the family that I chose, for example. Those are choices I would now question. And furthermore, if you say that I've created my own reality, doesn't that blame the victim, so to speak? So that's a concern that I hear people voice sometimes when they're grappling with this concept of creating their own reality.
Yes. So there's a variety of mediums that individuals may have encountered on your planet, films of various natures. Certainly there's some ideas that we could share as well. But one that comes to the mind of the channel in this moment is there's a film that involves an actor named Tom Cruise and another actor named Emily Blunt. And it's a sci-fi type of a film. And in this film, in order for them to move forward in the way that they need to move forward to, in this film, conquer the enemy, this individual frequently needs to die. The actor of Tom Cruise frequently needs to die to reset what's happening. And so at first, of course, he's very, very afraid of that because he believes in the termination of who and what he is. But after he's done that a number of times, he just does it to himself automatically with no qualms whatsoever because he understands the bigger picture, the context within which that resides. And so this experience is quite a bit like a play or quite a bit like a movie. And in that, when you become an actor in a play, you're totally aware of what the theme is going to be. That doesn't mean that within the theme, the actors can't add their own little parts. They can't ad-lib things that are going on the stage, and many times they do that. But you understand that when you're done with that play, you will walk off, you will understand yourself as the actor. This is essentially the same thing that's happening in this experience. Now, understand that as soul and as those larger expressions of self, you are totally without limitations. And so to create an environment that you can actually believe within that environment that you're not actually that, you had to create an experience that was incredibly powerful. You had to create an experience that utilized themes, that utilized expressions of consciousness that were very, I'll reuse the word, pull in their nature to keep you focused in that experience, because all the rest of you is right around you all the time. You don't have to go any distance for it's there. It's always right there. And so from the perspective of you as an eternal being, you understand completely that you're eternal. It's like if you're walking down the street and you're walking past any store whatsoever, and you think, let me go in and visit, I'll walk in that store and just take a look around the store. And then you know you're going to walk back on the sidewalk and continue on your way. You walk in the store, you take a look around, and you walk back out and you continue your way. From the perspective of the rest of you, you understand this is the case. You know this very well. You know what your abilities are, and you know that you're just exploring this particular amusement park, shall we say, for a short period of time. Now, of course, the themes that you've set up in this can be very, very, very challenging, very challenging. You may be strongly abused when you're very young. You may have all the people that you know around you die when you're very young. You may be in a country that's suffering war over and over again, and living in that environment is very, very, very difficult. You may suffer a tsunami when you're 6 years of age and die. Your parents may die in that same tsunami. You may have a hurricane or a tornado or something that destroys your homes. You may participate in fires that sweep through your neighborhood and burn your homes, maybe several times, right? There can be all sorts of very challenging things that happen in your life in that regard. And it can be difficult within that experience while you're having it, because you so strongly believe that what you are is the human being, the body, which was the point, was to be able to do that. You so strongly believe that that's what you are. And because you believe that is what you are, you look at that larger you as something that is separate from you, something that is not you, something that put you someplace that you don't want to be. So if we say to you that that's not actually the case, if we say to you that every night that you go to sleep, you are once again aware that this is a play that you've involved yourself in. It's a little exploration of consciousness that you know very well that you're going to come out of at the other end. You will look at it in a very different way. And of course, we know that that doesn't necessarily change the way that you may be looking at it now. But we will also tell you this, and this is especially true in this time period, more so than it was, historically speaking, a century ago or 2 centuries ago, shall we say. It's much more accessible, and that is your ability to change those situations, to change what it is that's going on. It's much more powerfully available to you than it once was. And so, regardless, and we can tell you this from the channel's own experience, and we can tell you this also from the experience of many, many other individuals who walk this path, that regardless of how difficult your experiences may be in this moment, when you start to explore yourself in this way, and as you begin to experience yourself as that version of you, which you will do, it will change the way you look at those experiences that you had. You will frame them differently. And I can tell you that this will happen. We've experienced, the channel has experienced it personally, and many, many other individuals have experienced it personally. You will begin to understand the context within why that happened and why it happened the way that it did, and how you can utilize your ability to look at that experience a different way to be able to help other individuals who are challenged by similar experiences. And so it's a very connected thing that we're all doing here, that all of you are doing here. And so this may begin to help you in that regard. But the exploration and the openness to begin to explore yourself from and within a movement that can help you to bring in another perspective will be a very important starting point. Because it can be a very common thing sometimes to want to keep yourself very closely aligned to that event, whatever that event was. And certainly, in line with the theme of what we're talking about now, you can make that choice. There's nothing that says that choice is a wrong choice or a bad choice. It will be a more challenging choice, however. And so to move instead down a road that says, there's a me that understands that event in a much more comprehensive way than this me understands that event. And I would like to have that understanding. And to embrace that approach and then to move in that direction will begin to bring to you experiences that will help you in exactly that regard, where you will begin to understand that situation, that circumstance, those individuals in a way that you were not able to in the midst of the experience. If that helps in any way.
Yes, that is helpful. Thank you. There is still the question for some people about how to go from seeing things as, if I'm responsible, then, quote, I'm to blame for negative experiences. How would you shift a person's perspective from that to, I am fully empowered when I accept that I'm creating this reality and that I did create this reality? What is the shift that's required to get from one place to the other?
Sure. So again, in this reality, what you've done with yourself is you've put yourself in an experience of process. In your natural reality, shall we say, as you bring an experience to mind, you're having the experience. There is no process in spirit. It's this experience, that experience, this experience, that experience. There is no transition from this experience to the other. They're just happening. That's what goes on here is the process. So let's say I know nothing about computers and I sit down in front of a computer and I have maybe a friend behind me and they're showing me how to get into my computer, how to pull things up in my computer. But I've never done it before. So I'm a little anxious about it. I may feel a little bit like, well, what are they going to think of me because I don't have this knowledge? I may be afraid of making a mistake. There's all sorts of feelings that are going to flow through me as I'm interacting with this brand new thing. But as I do that, what happens? In the experience, I begin to learn what it is that I'm doing, right? The process begins to unfold for me. This can happen in anything. This can happen if you're learning how to cook. This can happen when you're learning how to ride a bike. This can happen when you're learning how to drive. In fact, this is what happens in all of our experiences in life. They all begin like that. They all begin you not knowing what is going on with this experience and you learning through the actions, through doing the experience of how then to become familiar with this experience until you become comfortable with the experience. And now in some of those experiences, even when you're comfortable with it, you can have something come in that's new to the experience. Let's say a cook, or let's say when you learned to cook, what you chose, even though it's considered to be a separate thing by many, you chose baking. You became really good at baking, but maybe you weren't great at cooking on the stovetop. And then you had, let's say, a dinner party and your friend who typically did all the cooking on the stovetop wasn't available and you had to do that too. So all of a sudden now you're in a different realm, right? And it's a little maybe uncomfortable, right? And you have some of these questions that you're making about yourself. Oh, I'm not going to do this as well because I don't do it. What are they going to think about it? What are they going to think about me if I don't make a good meal? All these types of things start to come up. But then you do it. And maybe some people might go, well, your baking is better than your cooking is. Or they may say, oh, you did a great job. This is very nice. You can have all sorts of experiences. The thing is that you being the creator of your experience doesn't mean that you've done something wrong when you've had an experience that most people consider to be bad or wrong, because it's neither a bad or a wrong experience. It is, in that regard, only an experience. Like being new to cooking is an experience. Like being new to the computer is an experience. It's an experience. It's an opportunity to dig into, shall we say, other aspects of yourself that lay, maybe we'll phrase it, behind the scenes, and to pull those forward into your experience. You have the ability in all experiences to make that experience something different. That's the magic of this life, shall we say, is to transition, to transmute, to change your experiences into sometimes a very different type of an experience. And so what this exploration does for you is it allows you that to be a reality. In other words, you become familiar with the concept that when things come into your reality that are a little more challenging, that you would like to experience a different way, you become familiar with how to do that for yourself. Now, in the earlier stages, when you haven't had that experience and you're still questioning that about yourself, those experiences can feel a little different. But again, as you become increasingly familiar with that, then the feeling tone of how you interact with those experiences begins to change because your understanding of the big picture has grown in that regard. Your approach to those things takes on a different tenor, and you begin to approach them in a way that says, okay, here's the experience. What do I choose to do with that experience right now? How do I choose to change it? How do I choose to augment it? How do I choose to wrap it into my existence, my exploration of life in a different way than it showed up originally? If that helps at all.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. I love the concept of choice and how we are literally making choices at every moment. I'm curious if you have found certain mindsets, certain types of thought that assist a person in raising their vibration at every choice point in their day.
Yes. What we would suggest, and again, depending on what you've been doing so far, sometimes how long you've been at this, it may take a little practice. Again, process, right? It's about process here. And that is to think of these things as they show up as potential. What's the potential here? Well, instead of thinking of it, if you find yourself heading down the road of this is wrong or this is bad, or this should have been something different, we're going to suggest that you change direction a little bit and think to yourself instead, what is the potential in this experience? Because each experience comes to you for you to be more aware of who and what you are, more aware of yourself, especially as the you that is creating your experience. And so as these things show up in your environment, in your experience, in your perception of your reality, it is that. It's the opportunity to understand the potential in that, to then make the choices that will move you in a particular direction. And it's always up to you. It's always up to you. But that's the approach that we would suggest that you take. And many have spoken in this regard, but if you can do that immediately when you get out of bed, oh, I wonder what neat exploration I'm going to have in my life. I wonder what potentials for me to explore more of who and what I am are going to show up as I go through my day. And then again, as you're getting ready to sleep at night, you can even talk about the experience you're going to have at night, the interesting things that you're going to do in that environment that will then prepare you for the exploration and the potentials that you're going to afford yourself the next day, quote unquote, when you wake up. So that type of an approach is an approach that allows you to take your experiences as they show up for you and to configure them in a way that brings a level of fulfillment and satisfaction to your experience that will become a very nice wave that you'll ride that'll bring you into your following experiences, and it'll just continue like that. So that would be our recommendation.
Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners today on this topic of choice?
We just want to remind you that you always have choice. Even in those times where it feels very much like you do have no choice, there is no choice to be had here. Now, this may not mean that you may not need to take some actions that might be very challenging for you to take in order to make the choice that you know within you will change the things that are going on in your life. Sometimes your choices are like that, and those choices can be difficult to make. Sometimes those choices means that you're moving away from, physically sometimes, cutting the connections to individuals that you're quite familiar with, individuals that your belief systems tell you are individuals that it's important that you keep those connections to. And here we're talking about maybe close friends, it might be family members, extended family members, whoever it might happen to be. So understand that it's always up to you. The choice is always yours, regardless of the influences that you've had in your life that will color the way that you perceive things in a way that you think that maybe you don't have a choice in this situation, understand that you do. You always have choice. And if you can allow those inner parts of you to guide you, to attempt to be aware of the information that shows up for you, and it may show up as a thought, it may show up as a feeling, it may show up as an image, it may show up as something in your environment, it may show up as a comment somebody makes. Practice that a little bit as well. Practice being aware of the information that's showing up from those deeper parts of yourself into this aspect of who you are and what you're doing, and catch those and attempt to act on those if you can. I'll suggest that they'll never be misleading to you. But keep in mind that you do always have choice, that it is always your choice. And in those choices will set the theme for the experience that you're then about to have. Your physical experience is a very dynamic experience. And even though many times you may not be aware of it, it actually is shifting and moving moment by moment by moment. And so the choices that you make are important. And if there's a theme, a flow, maybe we'll put it, of choices that you would rather make, then attempt to work with yourself to, you could almost make it like a New Year's resolution made at any particular time, but that what you want to do is you want to pay attention to making that type of choice and try to catch yourself as you're making a choice that's counter to that and pull yourself back. And well, really, I would like to make this particular type of choice. So the idea of mindfulness in this regard will come into play, which means to be aware of what's going on within you, your feeling states, your thought processes, the concepts of why it is that you're making the decision that you're making, why it is that you might want to choose something that you're choosing. Learn to be aware of those things a little bit more too. Those will be important for you to do. And that will allow you to make the choices that you want to make. And so that would be what we would add.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And so in this, again, regardless of where you are in your exploration, understand that there's always more you around the corner, always more you to become part of your experience that you're having right now, and always more you to become part of your experience in a way that you will enjoy that addition to your experience. And you may be in a place that's hard to comprehend right now, or you may be in a place where you're beginning to experience that, or you have experienced that quite a bit. But it's really a process that never ends. There's always more you right around the corner to be part of your process. So in that, we'll leave you with that thought. And it was very nice to be with all of you, and very nice to have Lucy's collaboration in this. Thank you very much.